I was hired to evaluate an abandoned hospital wing. I found out why they sealed it off 40 years ago. The smell hit me first. That distinct mixture of stale air and chemical disinfectant that seems to linger in every abandoned hospital. But there was something else too, something I couldn't quite place. As I stood at the entrance of St. Michael's Hospital's East Wing, my flashlight beam cut through decades of darkness, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I'm Dr. James Ryan, and after 15 years of evaluating defunct medical facilities, I thought I'd seen it all. I was wrong. The hospital administration had been oddly specific about conducting this evaluation at night. Fewer disruptions, they said. Easier to assess the structural integrity without the day-to-day chaos. But as I reviewed the maintenance logs from 1987, the year they mysteriously shut down this wing, I knew there was more to the story than they were telling me. I've always prided myself on being rational, methodical, the kind of person who believes in spreadsheets and structural surveys, not ghost stories and urban legends. But what happened in that wing over the course of 1 week changed everything I thought I knew about reality. The first red flag should have been Nurse Martinez. I met her in the cafeteria during my preliminary visit, her hands shaking as she stirred her coffee. "Dr. Ryan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I worked in that wing back in '87. Whatever they told you about why it closed, it's not the whole truth. The patients—" She stopped then, her eyes darting around the room. "Just be careful what doors you open. Some things should stay locked away." I dismissed her warning as the ramblings of someone who'd spent too many night shifts alone. Now, as I walked down the dimly lit corridor of the third floor, her words kept echoing in my mind. My footsteps echoed off the peeling walls, each sound seeming to bounce back slightly delayed, as if the space itself was playing tricks with time. The patient records room was my first stop. Standard procedure. Assess the documentation before examining the facilities. The door creaked open with surprising ease, considering its age. Inside, metal filing cabinets lined the walls, their surfaces dulled by years of dust. As I pulled open the first drawer, a photo slipped out, a group shot of the wing staff from 1987. Their smiles seemed forced, strained, all except one, a tall, gaunt doctor standing at the back, his expression unsettlingly vacant. The name on the back read, Dr. Sebastian Kane, head of psychiatric services. I'd read about Kane in the preliminary reports. Brilliant, but controversial, known for his experimental treatments. He disappeared the same week the wing closed, leaving behind a trail of questions and a handful of dead patients. Official cause? Heart failure? All of them. The odds of that happening naturally were astronomical. The sound of footsteps overhead made me freeze. I was supposed to be alone up here. The entire wing was sealed off. I killed my flashlight, listening. The footsteps continued, moving in a distinct pattern. 3 steps, pause. 3 steps, pause, like someone pacing. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. The footsteps stopped. Then came the humming, a low, monotonous tune that seeped through the ceiling. I recognized it, an old lullaby, the kind mothers sing to their children. But there was something wrong about it, something off-key and distorted. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from Liv, my research assistant. Found something in the archives. Dr. K had a theory about collective patient consciousness. Started experiments in '86. Need to talk ASAP. I started typing a response when the temperature plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs, and the screen of my phone flickered. That's when I saw it, in the reflection. A figure stood behind me wearing a white doctor's coat, its face a blur of features that seemed to shift and change. I spun around, but the room was empty. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Or was that something else? A rhythmic beeping, like a heart monitor, seemed to be coming from somewhere down the hall. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I followed the sound. It led me to room 337, Kane's old office, according to the floor plan. The door was ajar, swaying slightly as if someone had just walked through it. Inside, the room was exactly as it had been left in 1987. Papers scattered across the desk. A half-empty coffee cup, now crusted with decades-old residue. But what caught my eye was the journal lying open on the desk, as if waiting for me. The pages were filled with Kane's handwriting, growing increasingly erratic as I flipped through them. His last entry made my blood run cold. The experiment works. The collective consciousness is real, but it's not what we thought. We didn't create a connection between patients. We created a door. And now something's coming through. They're in the walls, in the air. They whisper such terrible things. I have to end this, have to seal the ward. But it's too late for me. If you're reading this, run. They know you're here. They always know. A crash behind me made me drop the journal. When I turned, the coffee cup lay shattered on the floor. But it hadn't fallen. It had been thrown against the wall. Shadows were moving, coalescing into shapes that shouldn't exist. The humming started again, louder now, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Under it, I could hear voices, dozens of them overlapping, whispering words I couldn't quite make out. But one voice cut through clearly, speaking right next to my ear. "Welcome to my ward, doctor." Ryan. I ran, sprinting through the corridors as the lights flickered to life behind me, casting strange, shifting shadows on the walls. The exit door seemed to get further away with each step, the hallway stretching impossibly long. Behind me, the voices grew louder, and footsteps, so many footsteps, followed. Just before I reached the exit, I glanced back. What I saw in that moment will haunt me until the day I die. A crowd of figures in hospital gowns, their faces twisted in agony, led by a tall doctor with empty eyes and a smile that split his face too wide. I made it out, but only barely. The door slammed behind me with such force it cracked the frame. My phone had dozens of missed calls from Liv. When I finally called her back, her voice was trembling. "Doctor." "Ryan, I found death certificates," she said. "Not just from 87. There were others going back decades, all with Kane's signature. But here's the thing, the dates on some of them. They're from after the wing closed. The last one was filed yesterday." I'm writing this now from my hotel room, my hands still shaking. Tomorrow, I have to submit my evaluation of the wing to the hospital board. They're eager to reopen it, to expand their capacity. But I know now what Nurse Martinez was trying to tell me. Some doors should stay closed, some wounds shouldn't be reopened. I'm an urban explorer who found something in Old Town's tunnels. The walls are trying to make me. I never should have gone down there alone. That's what everyone keeps telling me now, as if I don't replay that decision in my head every single night. But they don't understand. None of them do. What I discovered beneath the streets of Old Town wasn't just some forgotten piece of history. It was alive. And now, a month after my escape, I feel compelled to share my story, if only to warn others who might be tempted by the same curiosity that almost cost me everything. My name is Sasha Lauren, and I run a somewhat successful urban exploration YouTube channel. Nothing huge. About 50,000 subscribers who enjoy watching me poke around in abandoned buildings and forgotten places. I've always been drawn to spaces with history, places where you can feel the weight of past lives pressing in around you. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found in those tunnels. I'd heard rumors about Old Town's underground network for years. Local history buffs claimed the tunnels dated back to the 1800s when the original town was built. Some said they were used for smuggling during Prohibition. Others swore they housed a secret society. The truth, as I would discover, was far worse. Getting access wasn't easy. I spent weeks building connections with the Historical Society, convincing them I was a serious documentarian interested in preserving local history. Clara, an elderly archivist with kind eyes and silver hair, finally took pity on me. "Just be careful down there, dear," she'd said, pressing the ancient brass key into my palm. "Some parts of history prefer to stay buried." I should have listened to the tremor in her voice. The entrance was hidden behind a rusted door in the basement of the old courthouse. The key struggled in the lock, but finally turned with a grinding sound that echoed through the empty building. Armed with my camera, LED lights, and what I thought was adequate preparation, I descended the narrow stone stairs into darkness. The first hour was exactly what I'd hoped for. The tunnels were a documentarian's dream. Old brickwork, mysterious doorways, and artifacts scattered about like breadcrumbs from the past. I filmed everything, providing commentary for my future video. "Check out these marks on the wall," I remember saying, running my fingers along deep grooves in the ancient brick. "Almost looks like someone was counting days or trying to leave a message." But then something changed. I'd marked my path with chalk arrows, a habit from previous explorations. Except when I turned around to head back, the arrows weren't pointing the way I remembered. At first I told myself it was just disorientation. Caves and tunnels can play tricks on your sense of direction. But then I saw one of my arrows change. I'm not speaking metaphorically. I watched through my camera's LCD screen as the chalk marking shifted like wet paint running uphill. The arrow that had pointed left now pointed right. I replayed the footage immediately, hands shaking. The video showed nothing but static during those crucial seconds. That's when I heard the humming. It was faint at first, easily dismissed as the buzz of distant pipes or electrical systems, but it had a melody, something almost familiar, a lullaby maybe, but slowed down and distorted, and it was getting closer. I switched my camera to night vision mode, hoping to conserve battery life. That's when I saw her, a woman in what looked like early 1900s dress standing at the end of the tunnel. She was turned away from me, one hand trailing along the wall, making those same grooves I'd noticed earlier. "Hello?" I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm a documentarian. I'm not here to disturb anything." She turned, and I dropped my camera. Where her face should have been, there was only brick, the same ancient brick as the tunnel walls. But somehow, impossibly, she spoke. "You already have." Hearing my name in her voice sounded wrong, like stones grinding together. We all wanted to be remembered, to be documented, to be found. Other figures emerged from the walls, each one a horrifying fusion of human form and architecture. And now you're here to tell our story. I ran, the tunnels twisted in impossible ways, defying the mental map I'd made. Each turn brought me face to face with more of them, men, women, children, all partially consumed by the very tunnels they haunted. Their voices merged into a chorus of that terrible lullaby. What happened next exists in my memory as fragments. The feel of brick dust in my lungs, the sound of my own screams echoing back at me in voices that weren't mine, the sensation of walls trying to pull me in to make me part of their eternal documentation of Old Town's forgotten souls. I survived because of Clara. She'd followed me down, suspicious of my real intentions. She found me just as the walls began to claim me, my left arm already numb and taking on the texture of brick. The last thing I remember is her voice, strong and commanding. She's not for you. She's already telling your story just as I have. When I woke up in the hospital, Clara was there. The doctors diagnosed exhaustion and hallucinations from possible gas leaks in the tunnels. My arm had severe abrasions and mysterious mineral deposits that took weeks to fade. The footage from my camera was completely corrupted, except for one frame. A clear image of Clara, looking about 60 years younger, standing among a group of people in early 1900s clothing, all of them smiling, all of them whole. Clara never visited again. When I asked the Historical Society about her, they claimed no one by that name had ever worked there. But they did show me a photograph from 1922, showing the original town council. And there she was, the same kind eyes, the same knowing smile. My new high school was closed for 15 years because of structural issues. That's not why they shut it down. I should have known something was wrong when I saw those scratch marks on my locker. Not the typical teenage vandalism kind. These were deep gouges in the metal, like something was trying to claw its way out. But hey, it was my first day at Blackwood High, and I wasn't about to let some damaged school property freak me out. Looking back now, I wish I'd trusted my gut and run while I still could. My name is Sophia Vera, and I'm writing this because someone needs to know what's happening at Blackwood High. The school reopened this fall after being shut down for 15 years, and the official story about the previous closures is such obvious nonsense. They claim it was structural issues, but my research tells a different story. Between 1995 and 2008, 17 students vanished without a trace. The police never found bodies, never made arrests, and the cases just went cold one by one until the school finally shut down. My first week started normally enough. I made exactly one friend, Jamie Shin, a quiet guy from my AP history class who prefers sketching in his notebook to actual socializing. We bonded over being the only freshman in that class and our mutual hatred of the school's queen bee, Madison Walsh, who took an instant dislike to me. Classic high school stuff, right? But then the whispers started. At first, I thought I was hearing other students talking in the halls between classes, except when I turned to look, no one was there. The whispers always seemed to be just on the edge of comprehension, like if I concentrated hard enough, I could understand what they were saying. Jamie noticed them too, which was both relieving and terrifying. At least I wasn't going crazy alone. Things escalated when Madison and her crew decided to pull their first prank. They locked me in the second-floor bathroom after last period. I wasn't too worried at first. This kind of stuff happened at my old school all the time. But as the minutes ticked by and the building grew quiet, the temperature dropped dramatically. The fluorescent light started flickering, and in the mirrors, I swear I saw something move behind me. Not a person, but a shadow that shouldn't have been there. That's when I heard it clearly for the first time. "Help us, Sophia." The voice sounded young, maybe my age, but wrong somehow, like it was coming from underwater or very far away. The shadows in the mirror started moving more deliberately, taking shape. I saw faces forming in the darkness, teenage faces, twisted in expressions of terror. I screamed and pounded on the door until the janitor found me. I tried telling him what happened, but he just gave me this look. Not like he thought I was crazy, but like he knew exactly what I was talking about and was terrified to admit it. The next day, Jamie showed me his sketchbook. He'd been drawing the same faces I saw in a mirror over and over in obsessive detail. "I see them in my dreams," he told me. "They want us to find them." We started digging deeper into the old disappearances. The victims didn't seem to have anything in common, except that they were all students here. But when we laid out the dates, a pattern emerged. Every disappearance happened exactly 28 days after the previous one. And if we're right about the pattern, someone else is going to vanish next week. Madison's bullying has gotten worse, but now it feels different. Yesterday, I caught her staring at me in class, but her eyes were wrong. Completely black, like empty sockets. When she blinked, they went back to normal, and she acted like nothing happened. I don't think she's behind the haunting anymore. I think something is using her the same way it probably used others to lure away those 17 students. Jamie and I found an old yearbook in the library from 2008. The missing students' photos are all marked with the same symbol, a spiral with what looks like teeth around the edges. The same symbol is scratched into the basement door, which is always locked. We've seen lights down there at night, even though the administration swears nobody has access to that level. The whispers are getting louder now, more urgent. They're trying to tell us something about the basement, about what's really under this school. Jamie thinks he's figured out why we can hear them. We're both exactly the same age as the last victims were when they disappeared. I know how this sounds, but I swear every word is true. If anything happens to me, look in the basement. And whatever you do, don't trust the shadows. They wear familiar faces, but they're not who they pretend to be. The scratches on my locker are spreading. Every morning, there are more of them forming that same spiral pattern. Madison's eyes aren't the only ones turning black now, and yesterday, Jamie didn't show up for class. I think I'm next, but I'm not going to disappear quietly like the others. I've got my phone set to upload this automatically if I don't check in every 12 hours. I'm going to find out what's in that basement, what really happened to those 17 kids, and why this school was allowed to reopen despite its horrific history. If you're reading this, it means I failed. Or maybe I found something I wasn't supposed to. Either way, remember these numbers. 28 days. Keep count, and whatever you do, stay away from Blackwood High after dark. The shadows here, they're hungry. The carousel horses cried real tears, not the rusted streaks you might see on an old carnival ride, but actual droplets that rolled down their painted cheeks and splashed onto their poles. I watched one fall, caught it on my finger, and tasted salt. That's when I knew I'd made a terrible mistake signing the contract with Mr. Grimshaw in my own blood. Not that he'd forced me to. I'd offered. God, I was so desperate to escape my old life that I practically begged him to let me join Grimshaw's midnight carnival. Now, I understand why he smiled that way when I did. It's been 3 months since I started working here, and I need to get this story out before I can't anymore. My name is Jesse Davenport, J.D. to everyone here, and I'm writing this from the back of my trailer, listening to the copy music that never quite stops, even when the power's off. If you're reading this, stay away from any carnival that appears in your town overnight, especially if the Ferris wheel looks like it's made of black iron and bone. I ran away from home at 17 after my stepdad put me in the hospital for the 3rd time. Living on the streets wasn't much better, but at least I could choose when to run. That's how I ended up in Somerset when Grimshaw's rolled into town. I was sleeping in an abandoned warehouse when the carnival started setting up in the empty lot next door. By sunrise, it looked like it had been there forever. The work wasn't hard at first. I helped set up booths, ran the cotton candy machine, and cleaned up after closing. The other workers, we call ourselves midnight children, seemed normal enough, though none of them would talk about how they got here. There was May, who ran the fortune-telling booth and never took off her gloves. Tom, the knife thrower, who wouldn't eat or drink anything but black coffee, and Riley, who worked the Hall of Mirrors and always wore sunglasses, even at night. Everything changed during my 4th week when Mr. Grimshaw promoted me to the freak show. "You've got the right look in your eyes, J.D.," he said, his breath smelling like burnt sugar and copper, the look of someone who understands pain. That should have been my first real warning. The freak show wasn't what you'd expect. No bearded ladies or sword swallowers here. Instead, we had other things. Lunda, the artist who hadn't eaten in 30 years but never died. The puppet master, whose marionettes danced without strings and screamed in children's voices. And the twins, God, the twins, I still can't talk about what they do to the volunteers from the audience. But it was Sheena from the carousel who really opened my eyes to what was happening. I found her crying behind the ride one night, mascara running down her face like black rain. "I used to be in the audience," she whispered. 3 years ago, I made the mistake of riding the carousel at midnight. The horses, they weren't wooden anymore, J.D. They were flesh and blood, and they were suffering. I tried to help them, and that's when Mr. Grimshaw found me. I didn't believe her then, but last week I stayed late to repair one of the horses. As the clock struck midnight, I watched it transform. The paint became skin, the poles became bones, and those glass eyes, they turned real and looked right at me. It whimpered, "Help us," in a voice that sounded horrifyingly human. I started noticing other things after that. How the cotton candy machine sometimes spun out strands that looked like veins. How the funhouse music contained screams if you listened closely enough. How none of the midnight children ever seemed to age or leave, but the carnival always had new faces among its workers. Yesterday, I tried to quit. Mr. Grimshaw just laughed and showed me my contract again. The words had changed. They were written in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow I could still read them. My soul wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the carnival, just like the others. I'm writing this now because I can feel myself changing. This morning, I found sawdust in my bed. and my skin feels like it's hardening into wood. I think I know which carousel horse I'm going to become, but maybe, just maybe, someone will read this and stay away, or better yet, help us. If you see Grimshaw's Midnight Carnival in your town, run. Don't look at the lights, don't listen to the music, and whatever you do, don't sign anything. We're all still here, trapped in this eternal show, performing for the crowds night after night. And soon, I'll be joining the performance permanently. The copy music is getting louder now, and I can hear Mr. Grimshaw's footsteps approaching my trailer. My fingers are starting to stiffen, and splinters are pushing through my skin. This is my last warning to anyone who might read it. Some tickets cost more than money, and some shows never end. Just remember, those aren't mechanical animals you're riding on the carousel. They're us. They've always been us. I need to write this down while I still can. All my thoughts are still somewhat my own. The logbook entries from the previous keeper make more sense now. Those rambling passages about voices in the waves and shadows that move against the tide. I used to think he was just another poor bastard who let the isolation get to him. Now I know better. Now I understand why they found him in the lighthouse tower, his fingernails worn to bloody stumps from clawing at the walls. My name is James Thompson, Jim to the few folks who know me, and I've been the keeper of the Black Rock Lighthouse for exactly 37 days. The isolation doesn't bother me. After 20 years at sea, I'm used to long stretches with nothing but salt water for company. But there's something different about this place, something wrong. It started with small things. Items moved when I wasn't looking. The spare lantern I always keep by my bed would somehow end up in the kitchen. My coffee mug would be in a different spot than where I left it. I blamed it on fatigue at first. Keeping a lighthouse running is demanding work, especially in winter. Then I found the journal. It was tucked away behind a loose brick in the basement, wrapped in oilcloth that had gone stiff with age. The previous keeper's log, but not the official one. This was personal, filled with increasingly frantic entries that spanned his 3 months here. The first few pages were normal enough. Routine maintenance notes, weather observations, the occasional complaint about supplies running low. But then the tone changed. March 15th. The waves speak at night, not in words exactly, but in patterns. There's meaning there if you listen long enough. God help me, I've started answering. I should have stopped reading right then. Should have sealed that journal back up and forgotten about it. But I couldn't, because by then I'd started hearing them too. It's not just voices. There's something in the water. I see it during my morning checks when I'm cleaning the salt spray off the lantern room windows. Dark shapes moving beneath the surface, following patterns that don't match any tide or current I've ever known. Sometimes they seem to form letters, like something's trying to communicate. Last week, during a storm, I swear I saw a face in the waves. Not human, at least not entirely. The eyes were too large, too knowing. It stared at me for what felt like hours, and I stared back, unable to look away. When I finally managed to break free of its gaze, 8 hours had passed. The lamp had gone out, and 3 ships had run aground on the rocks below. I called the Coast Guard about the shipwrecks, of course, but when they arrived, there was no trace of any vessels, no debris, no bodies, nothing, just the rocks and the endless waves. The officer gave me an odd look when I insisted on what I'd seen, said there hadn't been any ships reported missing in the area. That's when I started keeping my own journal. The previous keeper's entries got worse as they went on. He wrote about dreams where he was underwater, but could breathe just fine. About voices calling him to join them in the depths. About figures standing in his room at night, dripping seawater that vanished by morning. I'm having those dreams now too, but it's the lighthouse itself that's changed the most. The spiral staircase seems longer every day. Last night, I counted the steps from bottom to top, 147. This morning, there were 184. I know how insane that sounds, but I swear it's true. The walls feel different too, softer somehow, almost organic. Sometimes I catch them pulsing in the corner of my eye like they're breathing. The worst part? I'm starting to understand the patterns, the way the shadows move, the rhythm of the waves, the whispers in the dark. They're all part of something bigger, something ancient, something that's been here long before this lighthouse was built and will be here long after it's gone. I found a note in my own handwriting yesterday, but I have no memory of writing it. Just 2 words over and over. Below waiting, below waiting, below waiting. The ink was mixed with seawater. The supply boat is due next week. I should hold out until then, ask for a replacement. But every time I think about leaving, the voices get louder. They're singing now, a melody that makes my teeth hurt and my vision blur. They're promising things, wonderful, terrible things that I can barely comprehend. The previous keeper's final entry was a mess of scrawled symbols and seawater-stained paper, but there was one clear line at the very end. The lighthouse isn't keeping something out. It's keeping something in. I think I finally understand what he meant. The light isn't meant to warn ships away from the rocks. It's a beacon, drawing them closer, drawing them to whatever lives in these waters, whatever has been trapped here for God knows how long. And now it wants me to turn out the light. I can hear footsteps on the stairs now, slow and wet, more than one set. The walls are definitely breathing. I can see them expand and contract in time with the waves. The shadows in the corner are taking shape, and I know if I turn around, I'll see them. The journal entry ends here. 3 days later, the supply boat found the lighthouse dark. The only trace of James Thompson was a trail of seawater leading from the top of the tower to the rocks below. No body was ever recovered. The lighthouse remains operational under automated systems. Local sailors claim that on stormy nights, they can sometimes see a figure in the lantern room watching the waves. I've worked at the Grand Majestic Theater for 15 years, and I've never told anyone about what happened during my first month here. Not because I didn't want to. Believe me, there were countless nights I wanted to scream it from the rooftops, but because I made a promise to her. But now that she's back, now that it's happening again, I need to break that promise. I need to tell you everything. My name is Benjamin Valdez, though everyone calls me Ben. I started working at the Grand Majestic back in 2009, fresh out of technical school with dreams of making it big in theater production. The Grand Majestic wasn't exactly Broadway, but for a small city like ours, it was as close as you could get. The building itself is this gorgeous piece of 1920s architecture, all gold leaf and red velvet, with enough history to fill a dozen books and enough shadows to hide 1,000 secrets. I still remember my first day. Janet, our stage manager, gave me the tour. She was this tiny woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, but there was something maternal about her, too. "Listen carefully, Ben," she said as we walked through the wings, "because these are the rules that will keep you alive in this business." I laughed at that. I shouldn't have. The rules were simple enough. Never whistle in the theater, always leave a ghost light on, never say Macbeth inside the building, and most important, never, ever go into Box 5. I figured they were just theater superstitions, the kind of traditions that get passed down like family recipes. Janet must have seen the skepticism on my face because she grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. "I'm serious, Ben, especially about Box 5. That's where it happened." When I asked what it was, Janet just shook her head and changed the subject. But later that week, Marlon, one of the older stagehands, filled me in. Back in 1938, a young actress named Eleanor Hayes had been preparing for her debut as Ophelia in Hamlet. She was supposedly brilliant, a rising star, but on opening night, she never made it to the stage. They found her in Box 5, hanging from the chandelier mounting. The official story was stage fright-induced suicide, but Marlon said there were rumors about the director being involved. I wish I could say I took it seriously then, but I was 22 and invincible, too focused on proving myself to worry about ghost stories. That changed during our first production of the season, A Streetcar Named Desire. Everything was going fine until Tech Week. That's when the whispers started. At first, it was just little things. Props moving between scenes, costumes being found in the wrong places, the temperature dropping randomly in certain spots. But then, Shara, our Blanche Dubois, started forgetting her lines, not just stumbling over them, but completely blanking out, staring into Box 5 like she was seeing something none of us could. I was working the fly system one night alone in the rigging when I first heard the singing. It was beautiful, but wrong somehow, like a record playing at half speed. It was coming from Box 5. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew the rules, but I did anyway. There was someone sitting there, a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her long dark hair hiding her face. She was swaying slightly, still singing. Then she looked up at me. God, I'll never forget this. Her face was just wrong, like someone had tried to draw a face from memory, but got all the proportions twisted. I nearly fell from the rigging. When I looked back, she was gone, but the singing continued, softer now, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The next day, Shara quit, just walked out in the middle of rehearsal, tears streaming down her face, saying she couldn't do it anymore. She kept talking about how she wouldn't let her perform, how she said Shara wasn't worthy of the stage. Janet pulled me aside after everyone left. "You've seen her, haven't you?" she asked. When I nodded, she sighed. "Eleanor doesn't like competition. She never got her chance to perform, so she makes sure no one else can either. At least no one she thinks isn't good enough." "But why now?" I asked. "Why this show?" "Because," Janet said, looking older than I'd ever seen her, "this is the first show we've done since I announced my retirement. She knows I won't be here to protect everyone anymore." That's when the pieces started falling into place. Janet wasn't just our stage manager. She was our guardian, keeping Eleanor's spirit in check somehow. And now that she was leaving, I wish I could say things got better. They didn't. Our replacement Blanche lasted 2 rehearsals before having a complete breakdown. The third didn't even make it through her first read-through. Props started falling during scenes, lights would explode without warning, and that singing, that terrible, beautiful singing, got louder every night. Then came opening night. We hadn't even found a replacement Blanche yet, but the director insisted the show must go on. We were in the middle of final preparations when Janet disappeared. I found her in box 5, unconscious, with bruises around her neck in the shape of fingerprints. That's when I did something stupid. Something brave, maybe, but definitely stupid. I went back to box 5 that night, alone. I had this crazy idea that I could reason with Eleanor, make her understand that times had changed, that theater was different now. She was waiting for me, not the twisted version I'd seen before, but as she must have looked in life, young, beautiful, and so sad. "They don't understand," she said, her voice like crushed velvet. "They don't respect the craft. They don't bleed for it like we did." "Then teach them," I said. "Help them understand. You are going to be brilliant. Be brilliant now as a teacher, not a terror." I'd love to say that fixed everything, that Eleanor saw the light and stopped haunting our theater, but real life, even life with ghosts, isn't that simple. We made a deal instead. She would let the shows go on, let the actors perform, but only if we promised 2 things. To maintain the old traditions, the ghost light, the whistle rule, all of it, and to keep box 5 empty, reserved for her. That was 15 years ago. Janet recovered, retired as planned, and I took over as stage manager. We've had dozens of successful shows since then, with only the occasional mysterious mishap. Eleanor kept her part of the bargain, and we kept ours. Until now. Our new director decided the old superstitions were holding us back. He sold tickets to box 5 for our upcoming production of Hamlet Eleanor's Show. And last night, I heard the singing again, louder than ever before. Last night, during tech rehearsal, I heard the singing again. Not the beautiful melody from before, but something different. Broken, wrong, like shattered glass being dragged across piano strings. I'm in my office now, staring at tomorrow's ticket sales on my computer screen. 6 seats sold in box 5. 6 people who have no idea what's coming. The ghost light just went out, and for the first time in 15 years, I can smell lavender and rope.